Chapter 18. This clothes, to buy or not to buy, seems to be a difficult problem for Qin Leji. Just buy it, and it fulfilled what Qin Shuyi said, with a precise eye. I picked up the ugliest clothes in the store. Don't buy it. In the face of Qin Shuyu's obvious targeting, the shop assistants also saw it. It would be too embarrassing to just leave in such a disgraceful manner. And Jing Shuyi watched the clerk's family go straight to the end of a set of forms, typed out the list, stood by the counter, and whispered to Qin Shuyi, "No, really buy it." Qin Shuyi nodded seriously. "Of course I really bought it." Jing Shuyi, "This is not very good." Qin Shuyi, "It's nothing, my little uncle's secondary card, he doesn't care." Jing Shuyi, "That's even worse, I don't know your little uncle." "Oh, I said that I will buy it, how can I go back on it?" Qin Shuyi probably got into the face-slapping script and couldn't extricate herself, a little bit above, with a posture that no one can persuade me to sign the bill today, just treat me as a gift and invite me to watch the concert. And a little bit of compensation for the previous incident. She didn't have the nerve to say what was in her heart. After swiping twice, she swiped the card, signed, and a set of actions was done in one go, and she couldn't stop it, much faster than when she was sorting out the manuscript. After waving his hand, he looked at Qin Leji and Yu Xingzhou angrily. "Thank you, sister. Are you insane?" Passers-by who visited this store stood here to watch the excitement. Qin Leji couldn't hold back his breath, pointed at Qin Shuyi and was about to step forward, but was stopped by Yu Xingzhou. Several shop assistants surrounded Qin Shuyi and Jing Shuyi, and there were many spectators around. Qin Shuyi turned her head in the crowd, with a flamboyant face. "Why are you swearing at people? What happened to me spending money on clothes? Did you spend money from your family?" Okay. Yu Xingzhou grabbed Qin Leji, who was aggrieved, and dragged her out. "I don't want to buy it, these few things really don't look very good." "It's not good looking, is it?" Qin Leji sneered, and said in a voice that only he could hear, "I think your eyeballs were going to stick to someone just now." The bright lights made Jing Shuyi a little confused. And the clerks are expected to complete the entire quarter KPI in one day. Looking at the eyes of the two is like looking at his own mother, which makes Jing Shuyi a little bit hard to get off. She felt that the brain circuits of rich people might really be abnormal. However, Jing Shuyi still changed into that red dress, and when she walked out of the mall, she was still clutching a lot of delivery slips. Like a hot potato, I really don't know how to deal with it. Even after starting to think about the refund, the money should be refunded directly to Qin Shuyu's card. The two stood on the side of the road, the car humming endlessly. "Where are you waiting?" Qin Shuyi put on her sunglasses and was about to call the driver. "How about going to dinner together?" Jing Shuyi shook his head and said, "No, I have an appointment for dinner." Hearing Jing Shuyi's tone implied joy, Qin Shuyi looked at her. The two met eyes, and Jing Shuyi raised his eyebrows, revealing a meaningful smile. "Oh, I see." Qin Shuyi suddenly realized and smiled teasingly. "No wonder I came here to buy clothes." Jing Shuyi smiled and said, "Smart." Qin Shuyi gave her a thumbs up. "Awesome. Go, come on. Try to win the little uncle as soon as possible." She didn't expect to be delayed in the shopping mall for so long. After bidding farewell to Qin Shuyi, Jing Shuyi hurried home. As soon as she got out of the car, she saw Shi Yan's car slowly approaching. Jing Shuyi glanced at the several shopping bags in his hand, thought for a while, and walked quickly into the community. Not for any other reason, she just wanted to put down the shopping bag first. Moreover, Jing Shuyi felt that the flat shoes she wore specially for going out shopping today were not very good looking, so she wanted to go home first and then change into a pair of high heels. But she didn't take a few steps, and the car behind her had already stopped. Jing Shuyi. Hearing him call her name calmly, Jing Shuyi subconsciously stopped and turned her head slowly. Shi Yan's car window was lowered, and from Jing Shuyi's angle, he could only see half of his face hidden behind the shadows, with deep eyes, looking at her. Boarding. Oh, Jing Shuyi had no choice but to get into the car with a bunch of shopping bags. When the paper bag was stuffed into the seat, there was a loud noise, and it was placed at Jing Shuyi's feet. Shi Yan glanced sideways and frowned almost imperceptibly. Business vehicles have never been piled up with such messy things. Somewhat abrupt. Jing Shuyi didn't realize it. He straightened his hair facing the car window, and didn't ask where Shi Yan was going. Jing Shuyi didn't bother to read the documents during the period, and sat quietly by the side. After half an hour's drive, the vehicle drove into the suburbs, crossed the national highway, turned to a scenic area, circled the lake, and stopped at the gate of a Chinese garden. This garden, which is semi-open to the outside world, is the property of the Qing family. It is private but has an elegant environment. It is the best choice for many people who love Chinese banquets. But the dinner hosted by the old man of the Qing family at his home today was not a formal business banquet, but his habit for many years. At that time, the old man lost his son, and there was no one to entertain him, and he had no other child. After being alone for a while, he began to hold family banquets. All relatives and friends brought the younger generation to participate. Old man Qing liked to watch the children lively. After more than 10 years, this habit has not changed. And the children have grown up, and they are used to attending with their companions, and the relationship between people is slowly woven into a web. A fixed social interaction of people. It's just that Shuyi didn't know this, and she followed Shi Yan into the depths of the garden, only to feel that something was wrong with the atmosphere. The waist of the corridor is unadorned, the eaves and teeth are packed high, and there are small bridges and flowing water around it. No matter how you look at it, it doesn't look like a place for dinner between men and women. Shuyi stepped forward in 2 or 3 steps, standing shoulder to shoulder with Shi Yan. Is this a place to eat? When Shi Yan was about to speak, when he looked sideways at Shuyi, his footsteps paused. His eyes swept over the top of Shuyi's head, and fell on her face looking up at him. She, who was not wearing high heels, suddenly dropped a bit, and when looking down at her, her face became even smaller. Shi Yan suddenly whispered, "Why are you so short?" Shuyi, don't answer if you don't answer. What do you mean by sudden personal attack? Everyone is more than 1 meter long. What's wrong with me being short? They also charge me half the bus fare. When walking through a long corridor made of solid wood, Shuyi finally learned that today was not a separate dinner for her and Shi Yan, but a dinner hosted by an elder of Shi Yan. Shuyi stopped walking immediately. Didn't you say you would have dinner with me? Shi Yan looked at her indifferently. Is this counting as having dinner with you? Shuyi, fine. She hung her head and hummed twice. You know I don't mean that. Shi Yan, then what do you mean? Shuyi looked up at him, held back for a while, but still didn't say anything. Forget it, some people you just can't reason with. Walking to the door, Shi Yan stopped and took a look at Shuyi. He put one hand into the pocket, leaving a natural arc between his arms. Shuyi understood and took his hand. So now, she is attending this dinner as the female companion of Shi Yan. But this did not make Shuyi happy. Due to work reasons, they are also often invited to various banquets and receptions, knowing very well that on such occasions, men will bring their female companions into the venue. It may be a wife, a girlfriend, a colleague, or a friend who just met once. So Shuyi thought, for Shi Yan, he must often go in and out with all kinds of female companions, and he doesn't take it seriously at all. Today is not her, Shuyi, there must be someone else. No wonder Shi Yan promised so readily last night. Maybe she was looking for a female partner, so she bumped into it. Well, Shuyi was inevitably speechless. A businessman is a businessman, and a business that does not make money is really not at all involved. Fortunately, this dinner seems to be closer to the nature of feast, not very serious, and you don't even have to dress up to attend. And this year is a Chinese-style dinner, which is much less social. It is this group of juniors who got together for a meal a year ago. In the largest box in the garden, only 4 tables are arranged, separated by emerald screens, retaining a little privacy in the nature of the party. The moment Shi Yan entered, someone sat directly opposite the door and greeted him. In the crowd, the banquet is always the moment that everyone focuses on. As soon as they heard him coming, many people cast their eyes one after another. Shuyi stood next to Shi Yan, holding his hand, and felt that many people were also looking at him curiously. Is there such a fuss? Shuyi was puzzled. Isn't it normal to bring a companion to a banquet? But I don't know. After many people present exchanged a look, all kinds of conjectures have quietly floated in the subtle expressions. Afterwards, certain WeChat groups started frantically jumping messages. Is this the actress on the banquet car? I haven't seen it before. It seems to be an 18th line. It is said that the acting skills are very good. It looks really good, but it's not famous at all. Based on this appearance, within half a year, Shi Yan will be able to make her famous. Why don't you go up and say hello and get to know each other? Maybe you will become a top actress in the future. So, as soon as Shi Yan and Shuyi were seated, before they had time to introduce, someone stepped forward. I don't pay much attention to the entertainment industry recently. A young man sitting opposite looked at Shi Yan, pointed at Shuyi, and asked, "Who is this?" "Ah, I know." Before Shi Yan could reply, a girl said, "Are you the heroine of the web drama The Legend of Princess Xiaolan a while ago?" As soon as she said this, another girl answered, "Yes, yes, yes, I remembered that when I said this, we also said that the heroine is very beautiful, but I didn't expect modern clothes to look better." Shuyi. Shi Yan glanced at her sideways, but didn't speak. Shuyi could only smile sarcastically, and said, "You may have misunderstood, I am a reporter from Kaijing Weekly." Everyone suddenly realized, and there were some strange eyes. Soon, the WeChat group became active again. "I spent the spring night with an actress last night, but today I changed to a beautiful reporter. Shizong is awesome. Brought Uncle Chang's family banquet. It seems that this reporter is more pleased. Mr. Shi really likes more connotative ones. I feel sorry for a certain actress, Dianwax." Shuyi didn't know that Shi Yan's reputation had been imperceptibly killed, so he ate in silence, listened to their chats, and didn't interrupt much. Towards the end, Shuyi was really bored, so he took out his phone and looked at it. It was displayed on the lock screen that there were several messages from Yu Xingzhou in the text box. She frowned. At that time, Yu Xingzhou's WeChat and Weibo were blocked decisively, but because he basically didn't use the phone except for work, he forgot to have a mobile phone number. She opened the text message and saw that Yu Xingzhou had sent her 2 messages. 20 minutes ago. Yu Xingzhou, Shuyi, are you free? 5 minutes ago. Yu Xingzhou, I have something to tell you. Shuyi glanced at it, and when he was about to block the number, the other party sent another message. Yu Xingzhou, Shuyi, are you busy? What are you doing now? Shuyi sneered inwardly, typing away. Shuyi, make love. After posting this, Shuyi imagined Yu Xingzhou's green face, and he immediately felt refreshed, and the corners of his mouth slowly curled up. Almost at the same time, she seemed to feel something again. Slowly turn your head to the left. Unreasonably, it seemed that he met Shi Yan's gaze again as expected. His eyelids drooped, his eyes flicked across Shuyi's phone screen, and then returned to her face again. The air seemed to freeze at this moment. The smile on the corner of Shuyi's mouth froze, expressionless. He turned his head mechanically, typed mechanically, and filled in 3 words under Shi Yan's gaze. Shuyi, heart cake. After posting, put down the phone. Shuyi looked at his nose, and his heart. The line of sight beside her finally left her body slowly. He didn't say anything, but it was more embarrassing than what he said. The conversation during the dinner was still the same, the atmosphere was no different from half a minute ago. Shuyi also seemed normal, as demure and gentle as before, without saying a word. However, 2 minutes later, someone saw Shuyi slowly pushing away the bowl in front of him, then put his palms together and put them on the table. Then, she buried her face in it. The shoulders receded, the hair fell, and the whole figure seemed to be burrowed into some kind of hole. Someone asked, "What happened to her?" Shi Yan lowered his eyes to look at her, and gently stroked the back of her slightly trembling head with his palm. "Not sure," he said calmly, "maybe the food is not to your liking." Shuyi didn't know what was said on the table afterwards. All she knew was that some people were alive but dead. Shuyi covered her face and made psychological adjustments for a long time, and she slowly raised her head when the topic on the dinner table had completely disappeared from the shadow of food. Fortunately, Shi Yan didn't have any expression fluctuations, and didn't even look at her. Shuyi breathed a sigh of relief. There was never a moment when she wished Shi Yan would not look at him so much. But after a while, a waiter knocked on the door and came in, serving a small cake in front of all the ladies present. Shuyi. Her back was stiff again, and she looked at the little cake in front of her as if her soul was out of her body, and her ears were buzzing. "Who ordered it?" someone asked. Shi Yan wiped his hands slowly and said, "I ordered." Shuyi. Shi Yan, some people prefer to eat cakes. Shuyi. She was still staring at the cake in front of her. Pink mousse, white cream, decorated with 2 cherries, very cute, and the taste should be very delicate. But for some reason, Shuyi saw an erotic feeling in this cake. I always feel that someone is connoting her. Chapter 19. The creek under the corridor occasionally has dead leaves falling, floating with the gurgling water. A few ancient lanterns shone on the painted pillars, reflecting people's faces indistinctly. The surrounding area was quiet, and a group of people chatted while walking, exchanging pleasantries constantly. bringing some drunkenness, and the atmosphere was harmonious and harmonious. Only Shuyi was out of place. She didn't have a faint joy on her face like when she came here, with a smile at the end of her eyes. Now silently following Shi Yan's side, eyes downcast, even expressionless. A few girls tried to chat with her on the road, but they were repelled by her cold eyes, and finally they could only interject with Shi Yan, "That friend of yours doesn't like talking very much." Shi Yan took a look at her and said, "She has a more restrained personality." They bid farewell in the parking lot. The driver waited all the time and drove the car in front of Shi Yan and Shuyi. The parking officer stepped forward and opened the car door for Shuyi first. Shuyi got in without thinking, closed the door, and huddled in the corner. After a while, Shi Yan got into the car from the other side. Shuyi saw him bend over the car from the window glass, and a breath that belonged to him poured into the closed space. Now it seems that as long as he breathes, Shuyi can feel a suffocating embarrassment. Due to her personality, Shuyi is not the kind of girl who can make dirty jokes, and jokes go hand in hand, and she is usually too embarrassed to pick up colorful jokes when chatting with friends. If she didn't want to anger Yu Xingzhou today, she would never be able to say such a thing. At least in front of the opposite sex, she has always maintained an intellectual and demure personality in order to maintain her professional image. Especially in front of Shi Yan, she thinks that the character design can fly, although it often overturns. However, it seems that it should be regarded as an innocuous little problem, right? But today, she really felt ashamed of herself. It's fine to say that she is making love, but he deliberately connoted it. At that moment, she seemed to hear the sound of the carefully maintained image being broken into pieces. Shuyi thought it would be fine if she sent this message at other times, but it happened when she was with Shi Yan. That little bit of subtle connection made her feel that the atmosphere between the two became very indescribable. "Send Miss Xing home first," the driver in the front row asked suddenly. Shi Yan responded. Shuyi still didn't speak. His fingers were on the edge of the car window, always paying attention to Shi Yan's expression in reflection. After he got into the car, there was nothing unusual. He was looking at his phone all the time, as usual, hardly pretending that there were other people in the car. The car drove very fast, heading towards Shuyi's house. Soon, the gate of the community came into view. Shuyi finally relieved the breath that was hanging in his heart. Fortunately, Shi Yan didn't say anything to her in the car, otherwise she would really find a hole in the ground and crawl into it. As soon as the car stopped, Shuyi quickly opened the door to get out of the car. "I'll go first, thank you." At this moment, she was glad that she was wearing flat shoes, and she moved nimbly and slid fast. But just after closing the car door, she heard Shi Yan calling her again. "Shuyi." Shuyi's heart shrank all of a sudden, pretended not to hear, and walked away. But after a few steps, she heard footsteps behind her. From the sixth sense, you don't even need to look to know that Shi Yan is getting off. Shuyi was shocked, but walked even faster. It's a pity that her behavior was too obvious. Until someone grabbed her wrist, she was still struggling subconsciously. So in the next second, she was pressed on her shoulders and pushed to the side of the tree trunk. Shi Yan was much taller than her, looked down at her, and saw the flickering light and shadow in his glasses, which made Shuyi hold his breath suddenly. "I'm calling you, don't you hear me?" His tone was cold and indifferent. Shuyi felt that he seemed a little unhappy. "I heard, then why are you in a hurry?" Shuyi was oppressed by his gaze and was very nervous. At this moment, she just wanted to go home early and didn't know how to answer. Shi Yan raised his eyebrows and looked down at her. "Are you in a hurry to go home and make small cakes?" Shuyi raised his head, and then he could see clearly that his eyes behind the lenses were obviously smiling. "Shi Yan, you are so annoying." Seeing her getting angry from embarrassment, Shi Yan let go of her hand instead, slowly withdrew her smile, turned around and walked towards the car, leaving a word. "Take your mess away, Shuyi returned home with a few shopping bags in her arms, threw herself on the bed, and stared at the ceiling thinking about life. The phone in the bag kept vibrating, and it took her a while to take it out to look at it. After receiving those 2 replies, Yu Xingzhou sent her several messages in succession. There are a question mark and a dozen question marks. His news is still coming in. Yu Xingzhou, calligraphy. What are you talking about? Yu Xingzhou, did you drink too much? Yu Xingzhou, are you okay? Shuyi twitched her hair irritably, poked the screen hard and typed, "You must be sick. Disturbing people's love is struck by lightning." After sending it out, delete it and pull black for a while. Shuyi lay back on the bed again. After a while, WeChat rang twice again. Shuyi suddenly opened his eyes, subconsciously thinking that it was a message from Shi Yan. She slowly reached out to touch the phone, and the conversation had already been made up in her mind. If Shi Yan dares to implicate her in this matter again, she will reply, yes, 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 yes. Just make small cakes. Can you do it or not? If you don't do it, go away and don't bother me to do it. Fortunately, after opening WeChat, the new news is not from Shi Yan. While Shuyi breathed a sigh of relief, the tense nerves all over his body finally relaxed. Thank goodness, Xie Guangkuan. Qin Shuriwe, how is it? Qin Shuriwe, how is the progress today? Shuyi, don't mention it, you would never have imagined the scene today. Not only did Ben Xianyu fail to turn over, but he also stuck to TVT. Qin Shuriwe, joke, what scene have I never seen? Qin Shuriwe, come and listen. Shuyi, didn't I have dinner with him, but my ex-boyfriend suddenly sent a text message asking me what I was doing, and I replied making love, but he saw it. Shuyi, later on, he still kept thinking about me. Qin Shuriwe, I have never seen this scene before. Qin Shuriwe, if I were you, you would be embarrassed to death, ha 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 ha. Seeing Qin Shuriwe's series of ha ha ha, Shuyi buried his head in the pillow and got bored for a while before getting up to take a bath. The next day was Sunday. Shuyi didn't go anywhere, just stayed at home and read a book, very peaceful. On Monday afternoon, she packed her bags and headed to the airport. There is an international forum in Wuchang this week, and Shuyi is required to go on a business trip for a week. Wuchang is a city in the southwest, and the weather is damp and cold. As soon as Shuyi walked out of the hatch, he felt a biting cold. Fortunately, Bai Ruoshan had already come to pick her up at the airport, and waved to her from a distance at the exit. Calligraphy. Here it is. The two have only met a few times since graduating from university, and every time they talk about traveling together, the plan will always be disrupted by various things. And Wuchang is Bai Ruoshan's hometown. She came back to work after graduation, and when she learned that Shuyi was going on a business trip this time, the host arranged everything properly. On the first night, Bai Ruoshan took her to eat local specialties. In the noisy small restaurant, the two sat at the table on the farthest edge. After eating, all the guests who came at the same time had left, and they were still refilling drinks. When old friends get together, there are endless things to talk about, not to mention that Shuyi has had too many things happen during this period, and once the topic is opened, he doesn't even have time to eat a few bites. Especially when talking about Shi Yan, Bai Ruoshan was taken aback. Really, the president of Mingyu Bank? Do you dare? Shuyi, why don't you dare? Isn't the CEO a man? Bai Ruoshan applauded her. Let me tell you, if you waste your courage like this again, don't blame Liang Jingru for changing the lottery. Shuyi. As dusk fell slowly, Bai Ruoshan took her to see the most distinctive riverside night scene in Wuchang. There is no hustle and bustle of steel and concrete at night here, and it is a little more peaceful. The two stood under the lamp and took a few selfies, which ended today's small gathering. Back at the hotel, Shuyi chose the best group photo and posted it on Moments. Long time no see, I miss you a little. For the next 4 or 5 days, Shuyi had a full schedule of work during the day, and Bai Ruoshan took her around for fun. It's just that every night, when Shuyi lays down on the bed and tries to harass Shi Yan, she will think of the little cake that night. As a result, the chat history has been stuck a few days ago. The night before leaving, Shuyi returned to the hotel after dinner. When lying alone in the room, the windows cut off the noise from the outside. Shuyi held the phone, and slowly fell asleep amidst the entanglement of weather to send a message to Shi Yan. Jiangqing, thousands of miles away from Wuchang, is currently raining heavily. The rain in winter always makes people sleepy. Even if Shi Yan is at dinner time, the partners talk a lot after drinking, and they don't quite arouse his interest. The mobile phone on the table rang suddenly. Shi Yan took it out and took a look. It was the itinerary for next month sent to him by the secretary. Shi Yan opened the picture and glanced at it, lacking in interest. Scrolling down the WeChat list, Shuyi's cartoon avatar was particularly obvious among all the business avatars. Shi Yan's fingers stopped here. Suddenly, it seemed that this person had not moved for a long time. By accident, he clicked into her circle of friends and saw a photo she updated a few days ago. Shuyi was wrapped in a fluffy scarf and a woolen hat. Most of her face was almost covered, only her eyes were exposed, and her cheeks that were frozen red could be faintly seen. Looking at the photo, Shi Yan's mind suddenly jumped out of the scene of her burying her face in the palm of her hand at the dinner party a few days ago. It turns out that she is also shy. This is the reaction when I am shy. Shi Yan smiled silently, and his gaze finally shifted slowly to the background of the photo. He pulled 2 fingers to enlarge the photo. Behind Shuyi was an unfamiliar bridge, the outline of distant mountains could be seen in the neon lights, and all the scenery did not belong to this place of Jiangqing. Shi Yan looked at it for a while, exited the picture, and then noticed Shuyi's words. "Long time no see, I miss you a little." The person beside him suddenly interrupted Shi Yan's thoughts. "Isn't this the reporter from last time?" The person who spoke was Guan Xiangqing. Tonight's dinner party happened to invite Guan Xiangqing to sit in charge. He was sitting next to Shi Yan, and seeing that he was not interested, he looked at his phone instead, and when he glanced somewhere, he saw Shuyi's photo. "I read her latest article 2 days ago, which is your interview, and it's really well written," Guan Xiangqing said. "The little girl looks young, but her writing skills are still very sharp, and she writes better than many men." Sharper. After finishing speaking, he paused for a moment, remembering that he had faintly heard rumors about Shi Yan and an unknown actress, and asked meaningfully, "Why haven't I seen her recently?" At 10 o'clock in the night, Shuyi was awakened by a thunder. She sat up dazedly. The light outside the window is bright, the wind is quiet, and occasionally there is the sound of falling leaves. It is winter now, as the saying goes, thunder and snow in winter. This shows that when dawn comes, Wuching may already be covered in silver, falling in soft snow. Shuyi grew up in a seaside city, and later came to Jiangqing, a place where there is no snow all year round. At this moment, thinking of the white snow in Wuching that Bai Ruoshan sends out every winter, Shuyi is a little moved. Anyway, it's the weekend, so it's not impossible to stay for 2 more days. As I was thinking about it, my phone rang suddenly. "Shi Yan, when will you return to Jiangqing?" Shuyi stared at the news for a long time, almost thinking that he was dreaming. After a long time, she slowly put a question mark in the past. "Shuyi, Shi Yan, Uncle Guan wants to see you."
Welcome to Storyverse. If you have any novels you'd like to see or stories you'd like to share, feel free to leave us a comment or send us a private message. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join our community of avid readers and romance enthusiasts.
Chapter 20. Uncle Guan. Shuyi thought about it for a while, probably because he was a little sleepy, and couldn't remember which number it was for a while, so he slowly sent a few question marks over. The moment I sent it, my mind suddenly became clear. Close towards. Become. Originally, when Shi Yan took the initiative to send her a message, Shuyi was a little surprised, and a little secretly happy. But when it comes to Guan Xiangqing wanting to see her, now her mind is full of this heavyweight boss. Shuyi, Guan Xiangqing, Mr. Guan. Shuyi, does he want to see me? Shuyi, why does he want to see me? In the private room filled with the smell of extravagant cigarettes and alcohol, among the people pushing glasses and changing glasses, it was nothing more than business dealings. The words were full of flattery, but in fact they refused to give an inch. The atmosphere was once tense. In this atmosphere, what caught Shi Yan's eyes was Shuyi's question marks that almost filled the screen. He took off his glasses and rubbed his sore brows. Hearing the verbal battles of the people around him, Shi Yan looked like an outsider, and clicked into Shuyi's circle of friends again, and glanced at the photo. It seems that the evening wind from thousands of miles away blows over, carrying the cold dew from the river, and the fragrance from the mountains, permeating the enclosed space. When I exited again, there were 2 more messages. Shuyi, don't tease me, just talk quickly. Shuyi, trembling. GIF. Shi Yan, he is willing to accept your interview. When Shuyi saw these words, he was overwhelmed with joy, and sent 5 "thank you boss villain kowtow" emoticons in a row. Shuyi, okay. Shuyi, I'll be right back. She lay on the bed, her heart pounding. She never dreamed that this kind of character that appeared in textbooks would be able to have real work communication with him at this stage. Like a piece of pie suddenly knocking herself out, Shuyi turned over and lay on the bed. After a while, her thoughts jumped out of joy and she gradually became sober. Her expression gradually became serious, even a little confused. Turning on the phone, he slowly sent another question mark to Shi Yan. Shi Yan, why do you have so many question marks all day long? Shuyi typed out a line, no. I just want to ask, hesitated, and then deleted it. She just wanted to ask, when did she apply for Guan Xiangqing's interview? But Shi Yan's harsh words directly dispelled Shuyi's thoughts. The next morning, she did receive a call from Guan Xiangqing's staff. The purpose of coming here is to finalize the time and other details with her. Shuyi looked at his next work schedule and said, I should be able to do it here. The time is more flexible and can be adjusted at any time. Staff member, well, let me see, can I do it next week? The time may be a little tight, but the topic is lighter. Yes. Shuyi said again, I'll rush back today to make preparations. Staff, are you abroad or? Shuyi, I'm on a business trip in Wuching. Staff, well, wait a moment. The other party put down the phone and talked to Guan Xiangqing beside him about the situation. Wuching. Guan Xiangqing lost his mind for a while and took the phone directly from the secretary. It's all right, don't worry. He paused, looked at the bare tree trunks outside the window, and remembered that he was amazed by the scenery of Wuching many years ago, so he said, the snow scenery of Wuching is very famous. It doesn't matter if you play there for a few more days, I want to only next weekend. Okay, alright, thanks. Unexpectedly, Guan Xiangqing was so easy to talk. Shuyi hung up the phone, still a little dazed. It was already bright outside the window. She got up slowly, opened the curtains, and snow fell into her eyes. The whole city was white, and even the leaves were wrapped in soft snow. Shuyi's expression moved slightly, and he took out his mobile phone, hesitating between changing the ticket and leaving for the airport. But before she could make up her mind, the airline made the decision for her. A text message was sent to remind me that the flight was delayed due to the weather. Shuyi breathed out and changed his ticket with peace of mind. Then, immediately called Bai Ruishan. It happened to be the weekend, and Bai Ruishan was also free. She thought she would send Shuyi away today, but when she suddenly learned that she would stay for a few more days, she was even more excited than she was, so she immediately drove to the hotel to pick her up. Wuching snow scene is famous for its Wushan mountain. In the frozen world, the lakeside is frozen into glass, and the rugged mountain roads are also turned into cradles of ice and snow. Bai Ruishan booked a homestay here with an excellent location. The room has floor-to-ceiling windows. When the curtains are opened, the outside is covered with ice and snow, like living in a fairy tale world. Shuyi played here for 2 days, took more than 100 photos and dozens of small videos. At noon on the first day, 9 pictures of snow scenes appeared in moments. In the afternoon of the same day, the photos of Shuyi playing in the snow were not enough to post even if there were 9 squares. That night, the hotel's bonfire party was broadcast live on Moments. The same goes for the next day. At this time, Shuyi looked like a southerner who had never seen the world. She was obsessed here, not only because she seldom saw snow, but also because she was under a lot of physical and mental pressure during this period, and it was rare to have a chance to relax, accompanied by old friends, like hiding in a fantasy world. In this world, there are no jobs, no yuxingzhou, no qinleji, and no difficult banquets. So when it was time to leave, at 7 o'clock in the morning, Shuyi and Bai Ruishan sat on the bus going up and down the mountain, looked at the snow scene flying by in front of the window, and murmured, I really don't want to leave. Bai Ruishan snorted twice, okay, you can ask for 2 more days off, your leader is easy to talk, and I will definitely agree. Shuyi leaned against the car window and didn't speak. It seemed that he was really moved. Bai Ruishan felt a little funny instead. Are you so reluctant? Forgot that Jiangqing still has a big business. Shuyi turned his head and looked at her for a moment before realizing what she meant. Oh, you said the banquet. Shuyi snorted coldly again. It's as if I'll be able to do anything if I go back immediately. Having said that, but because of Bai Ruishan's mention, Shuyi felt a little itchy when he realized the banquet. Harassing him from time to time has almost become a habit. After a few days of no movement, he feels a little uncomfortable. Anyway, people have to go back, and the big business must continue. Therefore, Shuyi took out his mobile phone and thought about his words for a while. After much deliberation, I only sent 4 simple words, I'm back. This was the first time that Shuyi sent him these random things after adding WeChat, and he felt a little uneasy, not knowing how he would reply, or never reply at all. The bus went downhill slowly, the wheels were tied with iron chains, the speed was extremely slow, and the ups and downs were uncomfortable. Shuyi was leaning on the seat, and when he was drowsy in the stuffy air, his phone suddenly vibrated. Shi Yan, it's still early. Shuyi's consciousness was slowly awakened in this WeChat message. She stared at these 3 words for a long time, and for some reason, she always felt a strange feeling of yin and yang. Once accepting this setting, Shuyi could even imagine Shi Yan sneering on the phone. If this is the case, then Yan is thinking that she has been away for too long. Without her dangling in front of his eyes, did he get used to it already? Shuyi was thinking about it. The car suddenly bumped, everyone in the car exclaimed, and her head hit the car window. A burst of pain hit, and Shuyi also woke up, and completely overthrow the self of the previous moment. How could Shi Yan be cloudy, positive, strange? Gas, he can only take a knife in his hand and let people splatter 3 feet of blood. But this does not prevent Shuyi from wanting to play a role. Shuyi, you speak in a strange tone today. This time, the other side returned almost in seconds. Shi Yan, you think too much. Shuyi held back her laughter and typed, it's so cute. After waiting for a long time, the other party did not return, and even that the other party is typing was invisible when he looked up. Shuyi lowered his head, dangling with the car. She seems to have overdone it, and chatted to death again. That afternoon, when Shuyi returned to Jiangqing, he was stopped by the security guard just after passing by the gate guard of the community. Girl. The security guard poked his head out of the window and waved at her. Are you Shuyi? Shuyi nodded. What's wrong? The security guard frowned and said, your courier has not come to pick it up for a few days. There are too many, and I can't put it down. I moved it to the property office for you. Remember to pick it up. After finishing speaking, the security guard looked at her a few times. Forget it, you can't move it, let me move it for you. It's not surprising that there are express delivery, but when the security guard said too many, Shuyi was taken aback for a moment, and quickly realized it. The clothes from the whole store that Qin Shiyue bought have arrived. No. Shuyi stopped the security guard who wanted to help, and sighed heavily. I thought that after running around for a long time today, I could have a good rest when I returned home, but I didn't expect to have to deal with these things. During dinner time, Shi Yan's phone vibrated continuously. He glanced at it, and it was a refund message from the bank card, and he sent 7 or 8 messages in a row. Shi Yan glanced at Qin Shiyue who was beside her. She was putting her hands on the tablecloth, slapping her gaudy nails left and right with her mobile phone. Shi Yan never cared about the deduction information received from the bank. He knew Qin Shiyue's spending power very well. But it is the first time to receive refund information. Sex change. Shi Yan asked nonchalantly, know that inappropriate things will be returned. Qin Shiyue realized that Shi Yan was talking to her, and was stunned for a moment. What? Return the goods. These 2 words do not exist in her dictionary. If the things you buy back home are not suitable, they will be left there and become ashes. Anything is easier than returning it. Shi Yan was silent, and when he raised his chin towards the phone, Qin Shiyue suddenly realized. Oh that. I didn't withdraw it, it should be Sister Shuyi. Shi Yan's gaze swept across her face slowly, the screaming is quite affectionate. She actually retreated, oh. Qin Shiyue murmured to herself, thinking that she still had to explain to Shi Yan, so she faltered and said, oh, just the last time, I found out that it seems that I misunderstood her. Shi Yan raised his eyebrows, motioning for her to continue talking. So I wanted to make it up to her and bought her some clothes, but I didn't expect her to return them all. Shi Yan tapped the phone screen with his fingers. This number is called 1 point. Qin Shiyue buried her head silently and stopped talking. Shi Yan looked at the phone again, and the refund information was in front of him. The numbers were clear. Not a greedy person. On the contrary, Shi Yan fell into thinking. On Monday morning, many people in the office building hadn't come out of their weekend state. They were sitting on their workstations with coffee in their hands, smirking hatch, and lost their minds. Shuyi seemed to be a different kind. As soon as she came in, people felt a high-spirited vitality. She walked with wind, with a smile on her face, and she was full of energy along the way, attracting everyone's attention. It wasn't until she entered Tang Yi's office that her gaze disappeared. What's so happy about it? As soon as she entered, Tang Yi felt the atmosphere around her. Are you in love again? Shuyi, not yet. She leaned in front of Tang Yi and said with a smile, I have an exclusive interview with Xiangqing this week. Tang Yi was silent for a moment. After that, he slowly raised his eyes and said word by word, which Guan Xiangqing? Shuyi shrugged, which Guan Xiangqing could it be? Tang Yi asked again, are you kidding me? Shuyi, how dare I make fun of this kind of thing? Tang Yi took a breath, you contacted yourself. Shuyi thought for a while, that's right. The disbelief in Tang Yi's eyes finally disappeared and turned into ecstasy. Guan Xiangqing has not given a public interview for many years. Now he seems to be retreating, but in fact his power is still an invisible hand manipulating the market. Therefore, he is still a big mountain in the industry. His interviews with people who have retired behind the scenes for many years are definitely the most eye-catching among all the topics selected by the magazine this year. But, Tang Yi looked at Shuyi, with a hint of helplessness appearing on his face. You will really find something for me. Shuyi, what's wrong? Tang Yi lowered his eyes and thought for a while, then waved at her. It's okay, you should submit the selected topic quickly, so as to catch up with the last important page of this quarter. Shuyi walked out of the office with a smile, okay. Outside the office area, Kong Nan couldn't hold back anymore. Seeing Shuyi coming out, he quickly asked, what's the matter, so happy? Shuyi told her quietly, and Kong Nan was shocked, it's the end of the year, and your performance this year is going to go to heaven. Hush. Shu commented that Kong Nan's voice was a bit loud, and said in a low voice, low key. Kong Nan glanced at Su Yuling and nodded, I understand, this time we must keep it a secret. Qin Shuriwe, who was stepping on the spot to go to work, came across such a scene as soon as she came in, and hurried over, what's wrong? What's the matter? Shuyi didn't intend to explain everything to her, but only asked with a smile, I'm going to do an interview this weekend, will you go with me? Hearing that it was the weekend and taking up the rest time, Qin Shuriwe quickly shook his head, no, I have very important things to do on the weekend. Well, okay. Shuyi shook his head lightly, don't regret such a good opportunity. Qin Shuriwe didn't care at all. But on the other side, someone listened to the outline of their conversation. Su Yuling turned on the computer, half supporting her temples, while looking at her interview outline, she let out a soft snort. At the same time, Tang Yi in the office stared at the computer, half happy and half worried. A few days ago, Su Yuling went to the editor-in-chief and complained, saying that she didn't have any important pages this year, and that she had no choice but to snatch Shuyi's interview. It's chilling. The editor-in-chief got annoyed, and couldn't push it away, so he could only finally ask Tang Yi to give her the last important page of this year. As a result, this Shuyi was killed halfway, and he didn't know where he got a big pie. Guan Xiangqing's character interview, if it is not a key page, the industry may feel that their magazine's brains have been kicked by a donkey. In the early morning of the weekend, Shuyi deliberately got up early for a run in order to make herself appear to be in a good state of mind. I came back and took a shower, put on light makeup, and didn't even use perfume to make myself look clean enough. Since it was the weekend, the place agreed with Guan Xiangqing was his home, an old bungalow residential area in the suburbs. This is the old rich area of Jiangqing. Many upstarts settled here one after another in order to maintain their appearance. It seemed extremely lively. At 9 o'clock in the morning, there were still many young people jogging on the road. Shuyi got off the car at the door and walked towards Guan Xiangqing's house without haste. She arrived 10 minutes early, so she stood at the door, took out a small mirror to check her makeup, and then stretched her arms to see if her hair was blown by the wind. Suddenly, the door in front of him opened from the inside. Before Shuyi could react, Shi Yan had already appeared in front of her. The breeze in the morning, blowing from the tree-lined road, is a bit cold, but it is also refreshing. Shi Yan only wore a shirt, which looked a little thin in this season. But he was alone by the door, with a relaxed posture and a somewhat indifferent expression on his face, which made people feel that he was not a person who could sense heat and cold. Shuyi's posture hadn't returned to normal yet. With his chin raised, he was caught off guard and met his gaze. Under the dim light, everything in sight is loose in the morning. And behind the lens, his gaze is also faint, but it may be because of the deep brows and eyes. When he focuses on people, there will be an attraction that captures all thoughts. Shuyi stared at him blankly, and subconsciously said, why are you here? Shi Yan tilted his head, raised his eyebrows, and didn't intend to speak, but he had already revealed everything. Almost forgot, Guan Xiangqing was his uncle. Meeting here by chance, Shuyi felt that it was fate from heaven, and couldn't help being happy. The corners of his mouth slowly curved, and his eyes smiled into crescent moons. Oh, that's a coincidence. Shuyi raised his face, long time no see Mr. Shi. After the words fell, the nanny in the house hurried over to receive Shuyi. "Excuse me, is reporter Jing here? Please come in quickly." The nanny's voice was so loud that it covered even the wind outside, and Shi Yan's low Shi Yan turned sideways and signaled Shuyi to go in. Guan Xiangqing's wife passed away a few years ago, and his children are also busy with work, so they are not often around. This 3-story-old bungalow was only lived in by him and a nanny who took care of the daily life all year round. It seemed empty and there was no fireworks. At this moment, he was sitting in the living room on the first floor, with a set of tea sets in front of the table. The green smoke is curling up, and the fragrance of tea lingers on the tip of the nose vaguely. Smelling it has a soothing effect. Shuyi walked over with Shi Yan, and seeing him sitting casually opposite Guan Xiangqing, she didn't know how to sit down. And Guan Xiangqing was holding the teapot, pouring cups cup by cup. The old god was there, and asked, "Are you here?" This is a kind of harmonious acceptance of Shuyi, and the goodwill is self-evident. Shuyi didn't care about it, and sat down beside Shi Yan. The tea house is not big, and the seats are closely adjacent to each other. The two sat side by side, their clothes touching each other, the sounds they made, and even their breaths intertwined invisibly. When Shuyi turned his head, he could clearly see Shi Yan's jawline and smell the faint fragrance of his body. "Let's chat casually today." Guan Xiangqing put down the teapot and said, "I read some of your articles, and I think they are well written, and you have a lot of fresh ideas. I haven't chatted with young people other than Shi Yan for a long time. So ask him to invite you over, let's communicate. Mr. Guan is serious." Shuyi said softly, "I should ask for advice." "It doesn't matter, it's all the same." Guan Xiangqing changed the topic and asked, "Have you had breakfast yet?" Shuyi nodded, "I have eaten." "Well, let's have some tea." Guan Xiangqing handed her a cup of tea in front of him. "This is my collection, and I don't give it to ordinary people." What Guan Xiangqing said made Shuyi a little flattered, took the teacup with both hands, and was a little nervous. "I'm not very good at drinking tea. I usually drink beverages. It may be that the cow chewed peonies." Shi Yan raised his hand and picked up the teacup in front of him. Without looking at her, he just said lightly, "Drink it, you will like it, this is boiled in snow water." Shuyi looked at Shi Yan puzzled. "What's wrong with the boiled snow water?" Shi Yan looked at her, eyes met. "Don't you like snow very much?" His voice was casual and seemed to have no particular meaning. But Shuyi was sure this time he was negative, positive. Strange gas. Chapter 21. After confirming this point, Shuyi felt a throbbing joy in his heart. Holding the teacup in her hand, her gaze slowly shifted from Shi Yan's face to the cup. The bright yellow tea reflected her smiling eyes. Shuyi pursed his smile. In order not to make a sound, he could only take a sip. She didn't appreciate the beauty of good tea, but with Shi Yan's words, Shuyi felt that drinking this tea was quite comfortable. "Well, it's delicious." Shuyi lowered his eyes, and the corners of his mouth curved slightly. "It smells like snow, I like it very much." At this moment, Shi Yan's expression was dull. After drinking a cup, he got up and said, "You guys talk, I'll go to the balcony." Shuyi nodded, "Got it." Shi Yan glanced at the top of her head lightly, said nothing, and walked quickly towards the balcony. He found a reclining chair, sat down slowly, relaxed and straightened his legs, and watched the fallen leaves outside the window. Next to the ear, the woman's voice was soft and flexible, stirring the vitality that had not sounded in the empty old house for a long time. In the morning, the sun is abundant, and through the 5-color glass of the old bungalow, the dust becomes lovely, jumping in the colorful light. Guan Xiangqing said that he was chatting casually, and the topic was not limited to a certain range. Sometimes he pointed out the current market changes accurately, and sometimes he talked about the mistakes caused by his inability to see the situation clearly when he was young. Time passed quietly in the chatting between the two, sometimes mixed with laughter, unaware that the sun at noon had already reached the roof. Shi Yan's shirt was warm in the sun, and when he glanced back, Shuyi pulled his hair back casually at some point, revealing his entire face, looking at Guan Xiangqing with bright eyes. The nanny came over softly and saw that the two were chatting happily, so she had to look at Shi Yan. Shi Yan nodded to the nanny, put down the phone, got up and walked towards the living room. "That's right, my first pot of gold was the 435 yuan. Who would have thought that it has doubled into today's Guan's capital?" Shuyi was very supportive, and clapped vigorously with a snap, accompanied by a wow. His emotions were high and his tone was high. Suddenly frightened Shi Yan, who passed by her a little. Shi Yan stopped in his tracks, rubbed his eyebrows, and said in a deep voice, Shuyi, enough is enough. Shuyi's expression froze for an instant, and when he looked up, he saw Shi Yan's slightly disgusted eyes. It's time to eat. Shi Yan's voice swept over her head, looking at Guan Xiangqing. Hiss, I forgot the time. Guan Xiangqing sat up slowly, with his knees propped up. It's okay if I don't talk about it, but I'm really hungry when I talk about it. Yeah. Shuyi turned off the recorder, packed up his things, and got up. I had a great chat with you today, and I will sort out the manuscript for you to review as soon as possible. She picked up her bag, then I won't bother you for now. Hey, the food is already on the table, let's go after eating. Guan Xiangqing pointed to Shi Yan, he's not in a hurry. Shuyi looked towards Shi Yan, he was already in the dining room, standing at the table with his head bowed, slowly intervening with a towel. Didn't look this way, didn't say anything. Guan Xiangqing's family has few people all the year round, so a small table was added in the dining room, only enough for 4 or 5 people to sit. So after he sat opposite Shi Yan, Shuyi naturally sat next to Shi Yan. There were 4 or 5 dishes on the table, all of which were bland in taste. Guan Xiangqing didn't have the habit of not eating or sleeping, so he wiped his hands, peeled the boiled shrimp, and said, Shuyi, how old are you? 25. Shuyi said, what's wrong? Well, it's about the same as I imagined. Guan Xiangqing nodded, it fits well with Shi Yan's zodiac sign. Shuyi blinked, and subconsciously looked at Shi Yan. He lowered his head and held the vegetables in his hands, without saying a word, as if he didn't hear. Shuyi whispered, I think so too. From Guan Xiangqing's occasional conversations at the dinner table, Shuyi understood that he still thought he had that kind of relationship with Shi Yan. But Guan Xiangqing is not a person who is keen to use the relationship of the younger generation as a source of ridicule, and occasionally speaks a few words, but does not directly point it out. And Shi Yan couldn't refute clearly. Just like the day at the racecourse, if Shi Yan said it right now, it would embarrass Guan Xiangqing instead. Shuyi wanted to laugh every time he saw Shi Yan unable to answer the conversation. Since she provoked this scene, let her continue acting. I have also been in contact with a lot of journalists. Guan Xiangqing mentioned in a sentence, old friends I used to know have worked for many years, and finally changed careers one after another. Especially in this era, with the decline of paper media and journalists no longer being the mouthpiece of society as before, it is not easy for girls to persevere. Shuyi answered, actually, most of the reporters in our magazine are girls. She glanced at Shi Yan and pointed, and they're all pretty. Well, this is the same. Shi Yan didn't speak. Guan Xiangqing didn't know the purpose of Shuyi's words, so he said, good appearance is also an unspoken rule. Who doesn't like to look at beautiful girls during interviews? Shuyi poked the ribs with chopsticks. Well, Mr. Shi really likes good-looking female reporters. Shi Yan finally stopped being silent, and turned to glance at Shuyi. The meaning of the warning is self-evident. Isn't it? Shuyi looked up at him, the intern who attended the press conference with me last time. Didn't you stare at him for a long time? Oh, Guan Xiangqing said slowly, is there such a thing? Shi Yan stared at Shuyi closely, and when the two looked at each other, Shuyi was inexplicably guilty, his momentum gradually weakened, and he lowered his head and bit his ribs. Only then did Shi Yan look away, and said flatly, no. Yes. Shuyi answered with her head buried, you still ask me where I'm going, and I say I'm not feeling well and I went home, and you still ask me what's wrong. Guan Xiangqing's eyes gradually took on a sense of exploration, and he wandered between the two of them. Shuyi didn't look up, but could feel Shi Yan's gaze on her. She doesn't look up. As long as you don't look at him, your momentum will not be weak. After a while, Shi Yan touched the back molars with the tip of his tongue, and said word by word, I'm kidding you. Real. At this time, Shuyi really didn't know whether he was perfecting his image in front of Guan Xiangqing, or telling the truth. He looked at him with burning eyes. Looking into her eyes, they looked at each other for a moment, put down the chopsticks in their hands, and raised their eyelids. Then how do you believe it? With your attitude, only ghosts will believe it. Shuyi quietly looked away and stopped talking. I thought this topic would just go around like this. Suddenly, Shuyi pointed to the boiled shrimp on the table and said, then I want to eat this. When Shi Yan just picked up the chopsticks, he paused and turned his head to look at her again. Shuyi blinked, with a naive look on his face, and repeated again, I want to eat shrimp. The two staring at each other at this moment is like a silent game in front of Guan Xiangqing. Girls, on the other hand, naturally have some advantages. Shi Yan stared at her closely, retreating step by step in the sudden light of her pupils. A bright red shrimp appeared in the bowl. Shuyi took an inch and said, if you don't peel it off for me. Seeing Shi Yan's gaze suddenly, Shuyi stopped talking. He lowered his head, wiped his hands clean again with a towel, and carefully peeled off the shell of the shrimp. But he didn't put it in his own mouth, but put it in the banquet bowl. Give. After the meal, Shuyi really couldn't stay any longer. She simply packed up her things and left with Shi Yan. The driver had already pulled the car to the door and waited. Shi Yan walked quickly, opened the car door in 2 or 3 steps, and then turned around impatiently. Boarding. Shuyi originally wanted to get in the car safely and leave, but when he heard his tone, his steps stopped moving. She looked at Shi Yan with her hands behind her back, and she didn't realize that her voice was a bit artificial. The weather is fine today, the sun is so big, it makes people feel very comfortable in the sun. I don't want to take a car, I want to take a walk. She took a step forward slowly. Why don't you walk with me? A gust of wind blew, and a few dead leaves fell down again. Shi Yan leaned on the car door, turned his head to look at Shuyi for a long time, and then slowly said, Shuyi, can't everything satisfy you? Shuyi. Perhaps it was the great victory at the dinner table that gave her great courage. She stared at Shi Yan and said, I not only make heaven and earth, but I also compose poems. Shi Yan remained silent, looking at her with a little frivolity in his eyes. Shuyi said word by word, Shuyi doesn't know that Jiangqing is far away, and Xiaoyan of the Shi family is jealous of Shui. The fallen leaves of the big tree didn't seem to dare to fall anymore, hanging on the treetops as if they were about to fall. When Shuyi spoke, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. After a long silence, Shi Yan narrowed his eyes, slowly lowered his hands, and walked towards her step by step. Seeing his aura, as if he was going to eat people, Shuyi was timid, and took a step back silently, but she had no way to retreat, and was easily grabbed by his wrist. Then dragged to the car. Boarding. Shuyi's heart was pounding, he didn't dare to struggle, and sat on it politely. Then, the door was slammed shut. Shi Yan stood outside, looking at her coldly. Through the window, his eyes looked particularly terrifying, and Shuyi shrank his neck unconsciously. After a long time, he finally stopped looking closely at Shuyi, raised his hand and knocked on the front window. The car drove away slowly under his captivating gaze. Shuyi lay on the car window, watching Shi Yan's figure gradually shrinking. And that aura seemed to hang around her all the time. If Sister Liang Jingru gave her another chance, she vowed that she would never waste courage like this again. This afternoon, Shuyi was sorting out the manuscript at home peacefully. There was a conversation between her and Guan Xiangqing in the recorder. Although the content was not compact, it contained a lot of information, and she quickly sank into it. The hour hand went round, and the sky darkened. Clouds covered the sun, revealing only a few glimmers of cloudy light. The room was so quiet that the ticking of seconds could be heard. A voice that did not belong to Shuyi and Guan Xiangqing suddenly appeared in the recorder. Shuyi, enough is enough for you. Shuyi came back to his senses quickly, raised his head and rubbed his eyes, sighed heavily, and then lay down on the table. If I knew it earlier, I would have listened to the persuasion, enough is enough. Well, now it's all right, probably playing off again. Early the next morning, Shuyi took his first draft to the magazine office. She wrote the manuscript very late last night, and she didn't feel very refreshed in the morning. She walked all the way to the workstation with Hatch, and poured herself a cup of coffee as soon as she sat down. Monday syndrome. Kong Nan was infected by Shuyi and Yan together. His face was full of sleepiness. I stayed up late last night to watch a drama. I couldn't wake up in the morning, and I didn't even wash my hair. What about you? Why do you look like you have a serious lack of sleep? Shuyi stared at the computer for a while, before saying, write a manuscript. Did the interview go well? Kong Nan whispered, nothing happened this time, right? Shuyi lowered her eyes and snorted softly, it went well, the manuscript was sent to the editor-in-chief last night. It's only Monday, and the office is already busy, surrounded by the sound of typing. Shuyi was still a little sleepy, turned his neck and looked to the other side. At the other end of the office area, Su Yuling came early, holding a cup of coffee, chatting with her intern there. Unlike Shuyi, she looked very energetic today. She was wearing a light yellow chiffon shirt, and the tassels were blown up by the air conditioner. The 4 words "Spring breeze is proud" are clearly written on the face. Just in time, Su Yuling also took a look there, and happened to meet Shuyi's eyes. Su Yuling's eyes were big, with eyelashes planted, and when the eyelids were lifted and closed, the eyes that looked at him seemed to be without kindness, which made the person being looked at very uncomfortable. Shuyi didn't know what she was proud of, turned her head away, picked up the cup and walked towards the tea room. She didn't have much appetite in the morning and couldn't eat much, so she decided to make herself a cup of cereal. Hot water gushed out, and at the same time there was a sound of high-heeled shoes behind her. Shuyi knew who it was without looking back. "I heard you had an interview yesterday," Su Yuling asked casually. Shuyi didn't look back. "Yes. You really are. It's the end of the year, and you're still working so hard." Su Yuling didn't leave after receiving the water, and leaned against the cabinet. "I don't have any good resources right now, and I can't get the important pages after doing interviews, so I might as well take a good rest." Shuyi was stirring the oatmeal and was about to speak when Su Yuling suddenly stood up straight and hurried out. Shuyi looked back, and it turned out that Tangy had come. Su Yuling didn't even take the cup, called editor-in-chief from a distance, and followed her into the office. There was a regular meeting at 9:30 on Monday morning. Before that, it was not easy to do anything in this fragmented time. Everyone was a little loose and got together in 2s and 3s. Qin Shuriwa was a few minutes late again, and when she entered the company, Shuyi, Kong Nan and some people from other groups were standing and chatting on the balcony. She put down her bag and walked over with a box of chocolates to invite everyone to eat. Everyone was sharing chocolates when there was a sudden movement from the editor's office, followed by a slamming door that alarmed everyone. Seeing that it was Su Yuling, Kong Nan coughed and muttered, "Why did you slam the door again? Will she pay for the editor's office being broken?" Someone originally wanted to answer Kong Nan's words, but when they saw Su Yuling walking towards them in a panic, they all shut up. She stared fixedly at Shuyi, her high heels seemed to cut through the ground, and walked towards her step by step. Everyone saw that her footsteps were a little unsteady, but they didn't know that she was already trembling with anger in Tangy's office just now. At the end of the year, all walks of life are sprinting KPI. The columnists were no exception. Su Yuling didn't have any important pages this year. Fortunately, after crying to the editor-in-chief, she got the reprint of the last issue at the end of the year, which was the top priority. She also paid a lot for this task, dredged up a lot of contacts, and even bought a brand name bag for the middleman. Finally, she contacted the co-founders of the 3 commercial banks and conducted a concentrated interview. Its gold content is so high, she is very confident that she can turn around in one fell swoop and get rid of the suppression of Shuyi in the past 2 years. Unexpectedly, she went to Tangy with the manuscript confidently, but was told that the key pages at the end of the year were written by Shuyi. She was not reconciled, not angry, and asked Tangy why he backed down. On the contrary, Tangy was a little impatient and asked her to go to the editor-in-chief directly. "I handed in Guan Xiangqing's interview draft this morning. You say you are the editor-in-chief, how do you arrange it?" Su Yuling's mind suddenly buzzed, as if he was in an ice cellar. This sentence broke Su Yuling's intention of struggling, but it also aroused even more hostility. She went straight to Shuyi, pushed open the balcony door forcefully, her chest heaved violently, and the door behind her shook and creaked. Everyone looked at her. Shuyi held a piece of chocolate in his hand, knowing that Su Yuling was coming towards her, but he didn't speak, just looked at her. "Yes, Shuyi." Su Yuling tilted his head and sneered, "Even Guan Xiangqing's contacts have been cleared." Shuyi took a bite of the chocolate and nodded, "I'm lucky recently." "Good luck," Su Yuling sneered, "Guan Xiangqing hasn't appeared in front of the media for many years, you tell me this is luck." Shuyi raised his eyes and looked at her lightly, "Then what do you think?" Su Yuling crossed his arms and looked Shuyi up and down. "Who doesn't know that reporter Jungde is so beautiful? I'm afraid he has used his advantages to the extreme. No wonder he is dressed up recently, but he never sees anyone after get off work." What he said was unambiguous, even vicious, not to mention that Kong Nan immediately turned black when he heard it, and even the people in other groups frowned slightly. They are all colleagues, and it is too ugly to talk like this. But the person involved, Shuyi, chewed the chocolate in his mouth, swallowed it slowly, and wiped his hands with the paper towel. Then he said slowly, "If I rely on my beauty to do my job, do you think you can still stand in front of me and speak properly?"
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to our channel for more captivating illustrated romance audiobooks. Don't miss out on our latest releases and be part of our growing community. Hit that subscribe button and embark on an enchanting journey with us.